Hi there, I'm Brian Foster. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at ReliaQuest. And I wanted to take some time to walk through ReliaQuest's security operations platform called GreyMatter. Really talk a little about how it works, talk about one of the underpinnings to the power of GreyMatter in really improving or decreasing the cost of visibility in your environment using something we call data stitching. And what are some of the key elements that make data stitching possible? So it's going to be a little bit of a chalk talk, if you will, on how GreyMatter works, and in particular, one of the key differentiators of the platform. And I'm going to be using this light board to do so. I want to start, let's draw our security operations team, right? Security operations teams are responsible for, in the enterprise, of identifying threats and figuring out what to do about them. So kind of the ability to detect, investigate, and respond to threats in their environment. And so you've got the security operations team, and there's a lot of challenges for security operations team. One of those has been, hey, how do I see everything in my environment? How do I respond to them? And let me just put up here, security team. And this, once again, is typically your security operations team. One of their biggest challenges is, as a security operations team in the enterprise, they have a lot of tools. Most enterprises have, a SIM, so something that's consolidating from a lot of different log sources, events and data, etc. A lot of people move to SIMs early on sometimes it's for compliance reasons, but in doing so, they realize there's a lot of data inside these SIMs that you can build correlation rules and use it to really identify is something bad happening in my environment. So SIMs became a source of detection and a very valuable source. And I'll talk more about SIMs because they still are a very valuable part of security operations and the role they play. But enterprises, these security operations teams, have deployed SIMs to consolidate data in their environment, give them some ability to detect and respond to threats in their environment. They've also, a lot of threats start on the endpoint, and in that endpoint, is where a lot of your data sits. These endpoints are on the go. I'm going to use my fancy little Mac SE icons here. And one of the things that has really, I think, taken on in their industry over the last 5-6 years are EDR solutions, which are basically increased visibility solutions for the endpoint. So it gives you far greater visibility of what's going on an endpoint. And it's really to help enterprises find unknown attacks, unknown activity that are going on on those endpoints. One of the interesting things about endpoint and EDR solutions is they have a lot of data. So generally that data doesn't sit in the SIM because it's too voluminous, but it sits out there in EDRs. They also obviously have a bunch of other security tools in their environment. I'm going to draw a simple kind of wall here, which we typically denote firewalls, as an example. And then once again, also enterprises have used or moved to, in the process of moving to the cloud. And so security operations teams, as they're dealing with understanding and having visibility in their environment, have to look at the cloud as well. So they're looking across SIM, looking across EDR, looking across their firewall, looking across their clouds, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And of course, what's going on out of all these solutions is all these solutions send out a bunch of alerts. In fact, kind of the next big challenge I want to talk about for these security operations teams is not only do they have a bunch of tools, and sometimes they've had tools that, hey, they had people trained for, but that person left. Now they got to find somebody that understands the version of the EDR, the version of the SIM they're using, the firewalls, etc. The other challenge is that all these different tools, all these different applications send out just a bunch of alerts, too many alerts, if you will. And so how does the security operations team understand across all these alerts which ones are real and they need to do something about, which ones can they ignore, etc. And so on top of having too many tools, they've got too many alerts that they have to deal with. And as I said, they spend all their time, and I'm going to draw hopefully magnifying glasses here, around these alerts. They have to kind of look at them all and figure out, okay, which of these alerts are things that I need to do something about. Right, and they got to do it for all of them, and it's voluminous and it's too many. And so this leads to, hey, they missed an alert that may have been something they really needed to focus on, and because they were looking at too many, they build in these systems ways to try to find the ones that are most important and prioritize. But there's just too many tools, too many alerts for the security operations team to deal with. So this is where products and capabilities like GreyMatter, our security operations platform, come in. Is we've built GreyMatter to basically solve this problem for our customers. So instead of the security operations team, going through and trying to look at what could possibly be millions and billions of events over a period of time in their environment, we've built this security operations platform that basically does that for them. And so this is GreyMatter. Security operations platform. And what the security operations platform is, it integrates with all these technologies that a customer has with two-way integrations, such that when alerts fire, those alerts come into GreyMatter, we look at them, and we correlate across all of your technologies, those alerts, to find out, one, are they all related to one incident? So we do duplicate them, if you will. We also look for false positives. We look for anomalous safes. We find the ones that are truly malicious. And then we pass on to security operations, the ones that they actually need to deal with. And I'll give you an example of this, like it's real live numbers from our customers' environments. If you counted up all the events that take place in all these tools in one of our customers' environments over a 3-month period of time, it was 108 billion events that were in their SIEM, in their EDR, in their firewalls, in their clouds. Out of all of those events, there were 335 escalated alerts to the security operations team. So obviously, this team can deal with the 335 much better than they could deal with the 108 billion. And so the security operations platform and the power of this platform then is, how do I take all of the noise and all the tools that customers have, and all the data that those tools bring, and understand it to know what I really need to focus on, and pass that on to the security team. And a lot of times for at least for ReliaQuest, we have our own security experts down here. I'm going to call this RQ experts. And I'll, once again, I'll put a person here. That's our security operations team that helps the customer. There could be, a few of these people. But these RQ security experts, these alerts may be coming to them as well. So the 335 alerts come to the RQ security experts, and then they go back to the security operations team on the customer side. But the goal of the security operations platform is to reduce the noise, is improve the cost of visibility. And I'm going to explain a little bit on what that means and why that is, but improve the ability to reach back out to all these tools and understand what's going on, such that I can find what are the 335 alerts that really matter for this particular security operations team that they need to deal with. And once again, it comes with there's two-way integrations between each of these areas. In fact, more I'll explain in a moment, with the security operations platform. Okay, so I'm going to erase this box in the middle and actually go into a little bit greater depth than how does this work internally. How do we take 108 billion events, translate them into 335 that either get sent to RQ's experts for the customer or to the customer, or to both. So let me kind of take this and just replace this box in the middle. And if you think about security operations, at the end of the day, they are responsible to detect, investigate, and respond to threats in their environment. And at the heart of our security operations platform, we do the same thing. So we have an ability that we call GreyMatter Detect, whose job it is to work with these tools to make sure we're detecting out of the 108 events what's going on that needs to be dealt with. We have our own investigate capability, which can be automated, or it could be assisted. And then, of course, we have the ability to respond. when these are either automated again or assisted. And of course, the difference there is assisted is, hey, we've built a playbook for you to ban a file, if you will, or isolate a host. We can have that automatically trigger if you wanted to, or we can wait and let a human click the button to do it. But we've built an integration for a playbook for maybe your EDR to isolate a host, for example. So each of these capabilities is present inside of GreyMatter. And the job is how do we take these events at scale and at speed, translate those into the 335 you need to deal with. And each of these elements come in hand. Now, there's an important kind of gap here of something that we call the universal translator. And I'm going to talk more about this. This is when you find out your handwriting is really bad and you can't spell. But universal translator is this body of this engine, if you will, that sits between GreyMatter's ability to detect, investigate, and respond and all your security tools. And once again, we're building this for the enterprise. So every enterprise has slightly different set of tools, configured slightly different ways. So this universal translator has to be really super powerful in order for us to be able to query all these tools to pull the data back and be able to reach back out and do automated actions. And ultimately, in order for us to reduce the cost of visibility, the denominator of that is how many of these tools can we automatically reach out to and get data back and visibility from. And this universal translator is a key part of that ability. And I'm actually, toward the end of this presentation, I'm going to double click in this universal translator and tell you how it works, because it is part of the secret sauce behind what makes GreyMatter work. So in this particular scenario, as alerts fire and come in, the universal translator and this whole thing that is GreyMatter reaches back out to the entirety of your organization to find other data relevant to the alert that fired. This is a concept called data stitching, which is when the alert fires, we try to query other technologies with the artifacts from that alert and see if any of those other technologies has any data relevant to that particular alert, such that when we're doing an investigation, either automatically or assisted, we can go through and make sure we're dealing with all the data that we have with respect to that alert, not just what came from a single tool. There is a kind of it's built on a premise that any one of the alerts from any one of these tools by itself is somewhat low fidelity. And the more you can corroborate that alert with data from other places, the more comfortable you're going to feel of automatically responding to it or passing it on to your team to do something about, for example. And so this data stitching, which I'm also going to talk a little bit more about in a minute, is this concept of letting your data sit where it's kind of originated, pull back the data on demand that you need to do an investigation, do the investigation with all those alerts until you can close the ticket and you're done with that data, and then delete that data. And it's one way that this solution scales is we don't end up trying to copy all of the data out of your tools and stick it in this platform in order to do this process. And that's this concept of data stitching, which once again I'll talk some more about in a moment. But back to GreyMatter. So what GreyMatter does is the tickets, the alerts fire in your technologies, and that alert fires, comes into the universal translator and into GreyMatter. We automatically query the rest of your tools with artifacts from that alert to see if anybody else knows anything about this particular alert. All that data gets enriched in the original alert, and it goes through an investigation process that is both automated in the sense of we can automatically do queries and pivots on the data that come back from the queries, do more queries, and ultimately come back to here's what it was, what happened, why it happened, and what you need to do about it a lot of the time. And that's the fully automated scenario. The assisted is we do a lot of those steps, but there may be a step in there that a human needs to go do. Maybe a result from a tool came back in a different, than we expected, or maybe it wasn't there at all, and a human needs to fill a gap in the analysis, if you will. And this investigate capability then, it can be automated. Right now, if you look at GreyMatter, almost 1/3 of the tickets that come into GreyMatter can be completely automated from its analysis perspective. And what that allows us to do is when that automation occurs, within about 20 minutes, we can send that escalated alert to the customer when it's fully automated. So instead of it possibly taking a couple hours for the analysis to be done by humans, we can get the first analysis of something that fired, that's one of these 335 alerts, get it back to a human. It actually could also be to the RQ experts, all within 20 minutes instead of a couple hours. And so that's the power of this investigative process inside of GreyMatter. After the investigative process, though, we can obviously respond to it. Now, most of our customers on automated response is something we all talk about. It's something we want. Not a lot of customers still have turned it on, but the power is there. If, let's say, the automated analysis comes back that, hey, there was a malware that was not clean, that's present, needs to be deleted, we can automatically delete that through the automation, or there's a playbook that the human can run when the ticket's escalated to kind of an assisted delete, if you will, or an assisted isolate the host, if you will, type capability. So response is another key part of this platform. Most of the time savings, though, in my opinion, is in the center part of how do we start automating the investigation so we know what happened and we know what to do about it. Because quite frankly, the response capability is pretty straightforward. Building playbooks for all these tools, most of the tools over here now have the ability for third parties to build playbooks and automations for them. The key part, though, is how do I get the confidence on what I need to do about it, which is the heart of a security operations platform, and it's the heart of GreyMatter. So this is, in essence, how GreyMatter works, how it helps these security operations teams deal with a lot of alerts, a lot of different tools, because there's a single platform they can use that can integrate with all of their tools, that can help reduce the noise and reduce the cost of visibility for their platform. And once again, it can be assisted by our own experts and our security operations team assisting yours for the ones that get escalated and what you do with it. So in essence, we become like a tier 2 and tier 1, and this becomes your tier 3, or vice versa. So that's in essence how GreyMatter works. There are two things that I want to talk about next that are at the heart of what makes this work and what makes this better. For that, I'm going to start over again and erase the board. Okay, starting over, I talked about what GreyMatter does and how its focus is in helping enterprises and their security operations team reduce the noise and the complexity of having too many security tools, too many alerts, too many manual processes to deal with those alerts by giving them a security operations platform that does those things for them in an automated and an assisted way. There's two key elements that makes that possible, and I want to describe those and talk about those briefly. One of those is the element of data stitching, and data stitching is not a term that ReliaQuest coined, but it's basically this process of taking an alert that by itself may be low fidelity or low quality, enriching that alert with information from other tools such that the resulting body of data, if you will, gives you a much better picture of what took place in that environment. And so with that data stitching, it's built on the premise that the data you need for doing detections is distributed and it's everywhere. And to describe that, let me kind of draw a little bit of what it looks like. And so I'm going to start with, once again, your security operations team and kind of what they're dealing with, right? So with the security operations team, I'm going to use the same diagram I drew before. It's made up of men and women whose job it is to detect, investigate, respond to threats that are in the customers in your environment. So this is part of your security team, and they're sitting there. One of the key tools that security operations teams have used has been your SIMs, and your SIMs, as I've said before, those SIMs jobs was to basically collect data from other log sources, mostly security tools, and take those log sources and kind of collect and correlate them together. So these are all the log sources that are coming into your SIM. I forgot to draw my little dots around the SIM, just my standard icon for drawing them. Right, so these are log sources into your SIM, and this is your SIM. Now SIMs are, and they probably will be for a period of time, the heart of your security operations team. They try to get all their high quality security relevant data into the SIM, and they have a lot of content, rules, detection rules, correlation rules written in the SIM, all intent on taking, when data comes from all these log sources, if it fits these patterns, or if it looks like this, it means this type of alert, and then that alert comes to security operations, and it's one of those alerts that they have to deal with. Now, there's a couple challenges with SIMs in the enterprise. One of them is not all your security relevant data can now fit in the SIM. There's just too much data to stick there logistically, just the size of the SIMs. And then also the cost of supporting a SIM continues to increase. And as the amount of data you want to stick in the SIM and the SIMs get more and more expensive, it's becoming less and less cost effective for a security operations team to rely on all their security relevant data sitting in the SIM. A good example of this are actually EDRs, right? EDRs are giving you visibility of what's going on your endpoints in your enterprise. And those EDRs spit out a ton of data, more data than you're going to be able to logistically stick in your SIM. So security operations team now have at least two places they need to go to look for security relevant data. They need to look in their SIM, they need to look in their EDR. They also, though, have cloud infrastructure, and not all your cloud data is going to be stuck in the SIM either. So you've got a third place, and then you also have your business applications. Right, so the security operations team now has, in this example, 4 different areas that they're really looking for security relevant data in the enterprise. And this exacerbates somewhat of their challenge. If they got too many tools, too many alerts, how do they simplify, how do they reduce the complexity of that environment? Now, going back to detection is a data problem, which is the data that's necessary for detection sits in all these locations. So it's distributed. A single event from any one of these isn't enough on its own. And so in order for you to do accurate high fidelity detections, you need to really figure out a way to get the data from all these places. Now, one of the answers to this, and let me kind of put one of my big notes here, is that data is going to be distributed. That's one of the big takeaways here. And as long as you agree with that point, you need a solution that can deal with your data wherever it's distributed, wherever it sits. Now, one of the things, and by the way, that all data is relevant to security is another key point here. Now, a single element of data may not be enough to tell you what happened, but if you can gather, the more data you can gather, the better fidelity your detections are going to be. And so those 2 points being said. Now, one answer to this problem that the industry and customers have said is, well, what if I created a data lake? And I take all this data from all these different areas and I stick it in my data lake. Does that solve my problem? Because now, instead of having to deal with distributed data, I've got it all replicated in one place. And in ReliaQuest's experience, that doesn't work. And it doesn't work for a couple of reasons. One of them is just the cost of getting all your data in your data lake. And there's kind of direct costs, and there's other costs that may be hidden. Some of this data may be sitting in multiple clouds. And depending on your cloud provider and your arrangement, you may be paying extra egress costs to take the data out of one of these clouds to stick it in your data lake. Another one is when we've seen people attempt this, they're spending all their time just curating the data instead of actually doing things with the data and doing detections, meaning they're spending all their time trying to figure out how do they normalize the data into this data lake, how they get it in such a way that they can, at scale, do something with it, et cetera. And then you still have all the data sovereignty issues that prevent you from having all your data in one place in the first place. Most of the enterprises that ReliaQuest deal with are global customers that have data requirements, data residency requirements across the globe. So once again, there's not going to be one data lake. There's going to be maybe multiple per region, things like that. So you're never going to get to one place or a place where all of your data sits in one place. And so that gives rise to this need for what ReliaQuest calls data stitching. Once again, we didn't originate that term, but it's basically this concept of let your detections occur and leave the data wherever it sits. When a detection occurs, reach back out to all these different areas, pull the data back into your security operations team and do detections on the data, run your investigation, and then once you're done, let it go, let the data sit and live wherever it's kind of originating. And that's this concept of data stitching. And so if I was to, what makes that possible, and so once again, then if I took this team at the middle and basically say they're running GreyMatter, and our security operation platform, that security operation platform integrates directly with all these solutions, but also anything else you have. If you have your endpoint protection platform, if you have, CASBs, whatever the latest alphabet soup, solutions are. You could be integrating with your email security, obviously your business applications. It could be integrating with whatever cloud security tools you have. Right, so this security operation platforms integrates directly with all of those. When an alert fires from one of them, we can ask all of them if it has any information relevant to that alert. So for example, maybe we get an alert from your SIM, we reach out to your EDR for any other information it may have. We can reach out to Amazon CloudTrail for any data it may have, pull all that data back into an investigation, do the investigation. Once the investigation is done, we can delete that data from our platform because it still sits out there in your SIM and your EDR and in CloudTrail. And that's this notion of data stitching. And behind data stitching, what makes it possible is something that's we call our universal translator. And that is kind of the last piece to this puzzle, which to kind of go into greater depth on, which is the universal translator is what makes it possible for us to sit at the middle of this when an event occurs, build a query that can go out to all of these tools automatically, gets translated into whatever their native query language is, pull the data back, normalize it, and then with that normalized data, do detection, investigation, and response, et cetera. And so the next thing I want to talk about that makes that possible is our universal translator. And that starts with this engine. So I'm going to try to draw an engine block here. And it's, I sometimes do this well, sometimes not so much. Here's the fan belt, et cetera. So this is our universal translator. And I'm just going to now, so the universal translator job is it basically sits at the heart of GreyMatter, and it really enables this data stitching. And so I'm going to walk through kind of the 5 steps, if you will, of, hey, an alert fires, and what do we do about it? And it all starts then with how do I build a query that I want to run across all of these. So let's say an alert fires and it had several artifacts in it. I now want to take those artifacts and ask all of your security tools, do you know anything about those artifacts? And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a query. And this query can happen automatically or it can be assisted inside of GreyMatter. So that's my first step is this query gets built and it gets sent to this universal translator. And that's step 1. Universal translator takes that query and we have across all of these tools, we've mapped them into kind of a common language, if you will, a common query language. So I always kind of build a globe there. And this has a bunch of mappings where, hey, this is what IP source looks like in this tool. This is what it looks like in that tool. So the first thing the universal translator does is it takes the query that's written in a common language inside of GreyMatter, either automatically or a human does it, and it sends it to this kind of table mappings capability where it basically translates that query to understands how that query needs to be stated for all the tools with this data mappings. It then sends that query to the tools themselves. So I'm gonna, this is the tool. And so the first thing it does after it gets this mappings, if you will, these are the mappings. It sends it to the tool. It sends the query to the tool. The tool, responds to the query, sends the data back. Of course, that data is coming back in the native format of the tool, and it has to also be kind of mapped back into the language, the universal translator into our query language. And it uses the same, let's receive the data back. It gets sent back to the GreyMatter in its native format. It gets mapped back into the format, into a common language and a common schema, if you will, inside of GreyMatter. And inside GreyMatter, we can then take that, and that becomes the output after it's been normalized back. And we can show you kind of that normalized data. And that normalized data then can be used in the investigative process. So we've got now across all your tools, all the information on that IP address or that artifact, that host name, that username across all your tools. It's all in a common data format that our automations can run against and say, here's across all these tools based on what we see, here's what happened, and here's what you should do about it. Or it's assisting a human doing the same thing. And so this universal query language, which sits at the heart of this, is what makes this possible. And this universal query language and this universal translator sits at the heart of our ability to do this data stitching, which lets your data sit where it wants to sit, allows us to do distributed detections, distributed investigations, cost effectively because we're not trying to create this data lake. And it has several benefits, and I'll kind of end on these. One of the things that GreyMatter overall provides you is that reduced cost of visibility. Right, that reduced cost of visibility is reducing the cost of trying to manage your data, put it all in one place. And so you could also see that's reduced cost of data management in a way. You also have more comprehensive investigations because of this. Right? Because now when an alert fires in one of your tools, we're not just relying on the data from that one tool to do an investigation. We can pull the data from all your tools using this universal translator to basically do a comprehensive investigation of what happens. And those comprehensive investigations leads to faster and better alert validation. Which, if you remember when I started this, I talked about, hey, 108 billion events happened over here, translated to 335 escalated alerts over here. It's through going through this process at scale that allows us to find out what really happened, what's important based on corroborating across all your tools using data stitching, going through that investigative process to whittle it down to here's the 335 things that you need to deal with, and doing that at scale and at speed. So those are the main benefits at the end of the day for what GreyMatter provides, leveraging data stitching and this universal translator. It really creates scale, improves the effectiveness of the security tools you have, of the security team you have, allowing them to do their jobs better, automating the low brain activities that take a lot of time, allowing your humans to spend time on the high brains. Anyway, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. GreyMatter, data stitching, universal translator, part of the key elements that differentiate the GreyMatter platform, that enable us to do what we do, and helping our customers be more secure and make security possible. So thank you for your time. Until next time.